welcome to the Morally Informed Interventions paper. I am Mariana Aylmer, and I'll be here showing you a little bit of our work today. If you're watching this video, chances are that you're a pretty busy person and you couldn't make it to the live presentation. So I'll do my best to be respectful of your time and present to you the essentials of our paper. First of all, let me give you a little context on who we are and what we do. I'm a doctoral student at Rennes School of Business and a partner at Aylmer Human Development, specialized in leaders' moral behavior. I'm a Brazilian, but I currently live in Argentina. And my partner, Roberto, is in Brazil now. He's a psychiatrist who has over 30 years experience in leadership development and organizational change in complex scenarios. He's a great partner, a friend, and the best mentor I could wish for. Since I was born, literally, he's my father. So for several years, we've been working in complex organizational scenarios with processes that involved diagnosis stage, an intervention stage, and then a follow-up of the consequences of this intervention. Toy models are one of the most important techniques that we use in the diagnosis stage, as a group interview technique that uses the discussion of metaphors created by the participants to deeply understand the dynamics of the organization. And during these processes, we began to find patterns of problems that were related not only to the managerial and organizational structural issues, but to a deeper layer of behavior, the working of moral maturity of each group. And why is it that we decided to work on this framework of morally informed interventions? Once we began to face this pattern of issues that had morality in their foundation, we realized that we in Brazil, in Latin America, and I'm sure in several other places of the world, were surrounded by problems that would be very much attenuated if the collective behavior was a little bit more morally mature. And since morality is already in the background of many issues we find in the workplace, we might as well learn more about the moral context of a group and activate moral changes while at the same time focusing on the practical addressing of these problems. We then went back to the literature to find Kohlberg's stages, represented here in his staircase metaphor. In Kohlberg's theory, there are 3 levels of moral development comprised of 6 stages. The pre-conventional level, which contains stages 1 and 2, relates to individuals who somehow strive for survival, either avoiding punishment in stage 1 or seeking personal interests in stage 2. The conventional level of moral reasoning concerns the social belonging and order, involving individuals who reason around the interest of a group to which they belong, stage 3, and those who see the need to comply with authority in terms of norms and laws, stage 4. The post-conventional level comprises the broader perspective of individuals when judging moral issues, considering the welfare of others involved in their actions, stage 5, and those ruled by a more abstract and universal notion of what is good and fair, stage 6. To Kohlberg, an individual's moral development happens with this expanding capacity to reason in the next stage, following one stage at a time and never skipping one stage. This whole idea of the broadening scope goes from the individual, first like trying to protect themselves and to gain their own interest, then to the group, and then to the society. So the pre-conventional level is more in the individual concerns. Stages 3 and 4, the conventional level, they consider a smaller group. And then stages 5 and 6, they can look in a broader perspective to society. And it's not that always people don't have the capacity to think in a higher stage when they're behaving in a lower stage. Rest's expansion of Kohlberg's theory goes into the notion of mental schemas of morality, or moral schemas, implying that individuals may be able to reason in one stage but have another moral schema activated by a certain situation or a context. In this example here, an individual is able to reason about politics and make decisions on that matter using universal principles of ethics and thinking about social justice in a very post-conventional attitude, but may as well have a pre-conventional attitude concerning their family safety or their personal interests at work. All this because the context activates the general knowledge structures from the past, the schemas that are related to different patterns of environment and behavior. Rest and his colleagues also developed the four-component model of morality, a framework that describes the generation of moral actions in terms of psychological processes that are essential to the formation of moral actions. So we are now going to understand Rest framework, then the morally informed interventions framework, and finally the relationship of how the morally informed interventions activate the four-component model of morality. So Rest proposed a series of four logically sequenced psychological processes that culminate in the implementation of moral actions. The first one is moral sensitivity. That is the ability to be attentive, sensitive, and aware of the existence of the moral issue in the first place. The second one is, once I realize that there is a moral issue, how do I reason? How do I judge this issue and its possibilities of actions? That is moral judgment. The third one is moral motivation. It involves the need to prioritize possible conflicting values and interests in order to be moved towards a moral action or choosing the more moral values. And finally, the actual implementation of a moral action, which requires the competence, the strength of character to follow through with one's decision. And oftentimes it requires a lot of courage to do the right thing. Rest and his colleagues emphasized the need for all of these components to be used together. And if only one of them was missing, the moral action was likely to not take place at all. Then now we're going to take a look at our framework of morally informed interventions, which begins with a diagnosis stage, when we identify the elements of the moral and managerial reality of the group. So we identify the main moral schemas in use and the moral judgment of the group individually, and then the managerial challenges. These managerial challenges are the guiding line for the whole process, and the perception of this urgent need to change or solve something specific that is bothering everybody is what keeps them engaged in this process. However, this information about the morality of the group and the activation of the moral aspects in the background is what sustains the entire process of change and brings it to a deeper level of meaning and solid behavioral change. Then we moved into the intervention stage, where we present the results of the diagnosis and challenge the participants, who are leaders in the organization, with some managerial tools to address the issues shown. Especially when we use toy models, when participants from these leaders' teams talk about their challenges and experience in the organization, the content of the diagnosis can be quite emotional, bringing the leaders of the interviewees to a very strong feeling of guilt sometimes, which is conducted into responsibility or accountability. These moral emotions are the ones who heighten this sense of, I am responsible for this. I have to change it. In the intervention, all the language and the material presented, the tools presented, it is all shaped to bring the group into a one stage higher perspective and behavior, comparing to the moral stage or moral schema recognized in the diagnosis process. Then the group faces a new issue. What are we going to do about this? And they are guided through an activity of a double loop learning to identify the underlying, the hidden assumptions that shape these issues and problems found, proposing new counteracting assumptions, principles that will remedy these issues from the root up. These new principles become simple statements that guide the group's decisions and behaviors from then on, called agreements. which every participant signs as a symbol of their commitment to this new standard of behavior, as seen in this example. This example was from a group that was from different countries at the same time, and it was one of the few ones that I have that are not in Portuguese. This one is in English, and all these decisions of the group focus on changing the root causes of the problems they found before, and all of them, they make sense for the group. They're not supposed to make sense for us like this. They make sense for the group that went through the process together. And all of these decisions, these new principles, they're going to bring the group into a new level of moral behavior, as well as addressing the issues found in the diagnosis stage. Then the group goes home with these new agreements and the mission to put them into practice. They're going to implement this new moral behavior, and we recommend that they report on the actions taken to live up to these new principles. These actions and their developments are then discussed and consolidated in a follow-up stage, where the group can see the results of joining forces to implement change and can now visualize the perspective of working towards a shared ideal. And how does this framework relate to REST, 4-component model of morality? Well, in the diagnosis stage, we identify the moral judgment and the dominant moral schema in use in that group. And then the emotional content of the diagnosis stage contributes for the activation of moral sensitivity, as participants become more aware of the issues that happen in their areas and of their responsibility over this impact. In the intervention stage, participants are challenged with the themes that are one stage higher from the ones identified in the diagnosis, and move with a collective moral decision towards the agreement. This reflection about the underlying assumptions of previous behavior activates moral judgments, and the value of prioritizing needed for the elaboration of the agreements activate moral motivation. Finally, the structural incentive for reporting the actions taken aim to activate the implementation of moral actions, consolidating a new standard of moral behavior. All these processes are focused on the real challenges and the perception of the needs of the organization. And the moral aspect activated provide the structure for these issues to be solved. The fact that these processes occur in a group setting also provides for the contextual influence that gives a little nudge for those who might be lagging behind and hopping on board on this process of change. But so what? Why is this even worthy of notion? Why should academia or practitioners or anyone care to think about morally informed interventions? As for the theoretical perspective, this framework serves as an application of REST's 4-component model. And further, literature has long called for an operationalization of morality. And this framework does so in a context-specific manner, focusing on solving real issues. This work also differs from most of the previous literature, as it focuses on the group settings rather than on the individual, and that's pretty new. In our view, the most relevant contribution of this framework is the visualization of an operationalized morality, not only for understanding, measuring, or teaching, but for the immediate application towards factual challenges and shared goals. This understanding can project the framework for solutions, development, interventions, and education in different scenarios. For example, in an industry that has had a fatal accident, or for promoting moral development in a small startup of former prison inmates, as we are beginning to do right now, or even in community organized initiatives for recovering from the pandemic impacts. The notion of these stages of diagnosis, intervention, decision, and a follow-up could potentially work in all these contexts, and so can the elements of activation of morality, but the format will change according to the needs of the group, the timing, the setting, or how to activate each component. It is important, however, to maintain a strong connection with the pressing challenges of the group and aim solution towards those, not towards moral development itself per se, but focusing on the real challenges of the group. The framework has the potential not only to influence moral education and business ethics, but also opens the discussion for exploring morally informed education and development itself in different settings. We truly believe that the information about we truly believe that the information about the moral reality of a group associated with an intentional and responsible activation of moral elements can promote solutions for this recovery from COVID. It can foster practical solutions with the perspective for caring for each other, for the weakest, caring for the people who are affected by our decisions. And we're confident that the more we do so, the more we care for one another, the more we can build this new normal to be better than the previous one. The main references used in this are in this slide, but you will find the complete list of the references in the conference proceedings. And I would like to invite you to reach out and contact me. It would really mean a lot to me to hear your thoughts on this work and connect with you. Thank you very much for your time and attention, and I'll bump into you in another session. Bye-bye.